Okay, you can see I've got a guest here today and familiar face. I got some very nice responses. Last time I had you here, Shawn.
Yeah.
Shawn studies with me and um, and frequently um, comes up with questions as he's thinking this through. I have some other students who I think I'm going to probably bring in here at some point or another as well, who are doing different things. I was thinking of Blake doing his sort of organizing the information that I'm giving out. I mean, it's very
Yeah.
interesting that he's trying to make himself more um, uh, uh, efficient at acquiring information. I guess would be the best way to say it. So
Yeah.
that'll be a good one if we decide to do that. But let me thank Sergio E and David D. You guys, thank you so much. Um, Sergio, I think I've seen you before, but I'm not so sure. But you guys be sure to put in your questions and discussion points as well. But believe me, we appreciate those recurring donations. And so I think we'll just get on with it. Shawn, I was going, wherever this came from. Shawn and I or I at least wound up talking about the Australian Aborigine youth having walkabout, and, and they make the way it was described in this documentary or whatever was that they would just disappear for a number of years at a certain age or whatever, and nobody had a clue where they went. So, uh, Gamble used to refer to falling asleep at the switch. You know, you're not being attentive. You're not always um, there.
Yeah.
And I got the impression you wanted to go in that direction. So you phrase it any way you want, and let's just wander around.
Yeah.
Let's have some fun because that was a thing. If it just to that extent, I mean, that was a thing that was for sure was a major game changer for me when I realized that I was just an athlete without a brain. It wasn't quite that bad. I mean, no humans are quite that, but
Well, I guess I notice I have these moments where I'm like, why? What did I just do? When I'm painting and,
right,
and everything,
right,
and then sometimes it's there's I guess there's different reasons why it happens.
right.
Sometimes I'm a little overwhelmed by what's going on or thinking about too many things.
Okay.
Um, but other times I wonder if it's just kind of falling asleep at the switch, or whatever. But I guess the question is,
Automatic pilot is one of the words
yeah.
that you might actually use if you're not always there. But yeah, that's where you started that conversation. Yeah.
So I
Give
wonder,
us a real example though of a particular, maybe even just make up a day in which this happened and how it worked out. I mean, just describe it a little bit more. So flesh it out, maybe if you can sort of, even if you have to make it up,
yeah,
get a sort of an approximal day that maybe you noticed it.
yeah. Well, it's like even today, I was thinking about being way more deliberate and intentional with what I'm doing, and it's going all right, and then it's almost like my brushstroke. If I'm not very clear about, if I'm ambiguous with my brushstroke application,
Okay.
I'm just kind of putting it down and not knowing what I'm doing. Then I stand back and then I just get sucked into it because I'm responding to what I did, and then I just do something else or something, and then then all of a sudden I'm kind of looking at it going, oh
Okay, I'm with you up to a point. I remember talking with one of my other former students, or several actually,
hmm
and asking that that particular one what he was now doing, and that person didn't seem to know.
hmm
And and he was just working on the painting, trying to make it more finished. But my point to him was, what at this exact moment are you changing in that picture,
yeah
and are you in control of it? So what I try to get you guys to do, and you just feed off of this in terms of your own, something that might be useful to others as well. We got flies now in the middle of winter. It must be too warm in here.
yeah
It did get warm. I didn't. No, I didn't think it was. It's been cold all day. So just for you, Sean.
yeah
Uh, uh, I I try to get you. When we're talking about laying in a painting, there's some intentionality there in the first place. Remember, I mean, you know that what I try to do is get you to rather, as it were, obsess about the color and don't bring any drawing to the game.
Mm-hmm.
But really, really, really put your time into getting color relations. So, and then we go from there to being like in our last video where you and I were, or at least about from your question, we're talking about, do you know what it is you're changing about the color? What is the thing about the color that you just put down that you're going to adjust? Is it the chroma or the hue, or is it the value of the color?
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it is, you work on it until you achieve the change, right? And so that's the intentionality I'm talking about, right? And that's, of course, everything in that world is relational, is purely relational. Of course, you set your darkest dark and lightest light, but if you have a color in there that's just out of value, you're looking at the rest of the values. You say, oh, or you see the color area and you see, you notice it's the value problem, and you simply must do the conceptualizing, the eye work of finding out where it should be by value in the context of things that are already the table setters, darkest dark and lightest light. So that's what I mean by intentionality. And I was trying to get this student to make sure he knew exactly what he was doing at every single second of his painting.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's daunting. I think a lot of times people just want to paint and have a nice day. You know, just sit there and work on it, and just the brain going like this and the brush going like this, you know.
Well, it's you know what's actually it's really interesting here, because what's actually happening is there is that intention there, and I do know what I'm working on.
Yeah.
But when I go to execute, it's almost like I don't know where. I have a hard time with my orientation in the picture plane, where things are. You know.
Well, that's the spatial. That's the spatial.
Yeah, I have a very difficult time with that, and so when I don't know where I'm putting the color,
right?
Because I have a hard time seeing it,
right?
I think that leads me to making an ambiguous mark, like general, like approximate in this area.
Okay.
And then I end up creating a lot of that ambiguity.
Yeah, but if the assignment, you know, I was talking to Philip today. It was kind of fun having the opportunity because of what he's doing. He's walking so slowly through a methodology, and most of you guys paint a lot, and then I try to correct your methodology. I noticed where you didn't do your work, and but he's really walking himself through it, and it's quite a beneficial thing to see, you know, to have you guys actually see. But this concept of obsessing about the color, by definition, if you're obsessing about the color, you're not worrying about the spatial, and it is one of those things you have to not let it be nagging you. Who does it think it is? You haven't invited it in the room yet. So, yeah, the only thing I try to get you all to do is, you know, you can approximate the location of your darks and make them a little too small. So they're not causing big headaches, even if they are off a little bit. But mostly, you know if this red spot here is down in the lower left, you're going to put it about in the right place.
Yeah, maybe
as you're going to make it red. You're going to put it in the right place. You're going to make it red automatically. But it's not. But it's just color, and it isn't a drawing problem. So it's not. You haven't addressed. You're just. It's absolutely minimal, the spatial part of it. So I'm just saying that to make sure you've heard it. And, you know, because and my point is, in each of these phases, our kind of painting, there is a thing that you're specializing in. You know what I mean? So when you go down, when you start bringing colors together, you're correcting your color. When you start bringing them together to get the spatial stuff, to get top and bottom, left and right, whatever, you start to organize the stuff, really organize it in space. You're still in the same place of having to correct the color. And I'm suggesting that you still don't remember you were obsessing, and now when you bring these together, obsess a little more. And then that becomes the platform, though, at which point you can say to yourself, now, where does it go? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you know, yeah, it brings to mind that I'm not fully in that place. I'm prioritizing spatial drawing over color.
Almost everybody does. Yeah.
So is that just something that I have to, something has to change in my thinking or in my approach or something, to get me to value the color or appreciate the color more or something,
Well, I think that, when you say, I say things like all over the place at once, all the horses at once, well, that immediately sets you up for failure. Because in the start, you're just all over the place at once, but you're not all the horses. We're slowly introducing the horses.
Mm.
And after you get all the horses out there, then it's every man for himself. Now you have to say what area this thing's least like, and then you have to be able to name it and say, is that a spatial problem or is it a color? I've tried to get people, if it's a color problem, to deal with the color.
Yeah.
Because if it's a spatial problem and the color's wrong, you know,
Color first.
well, you got to draw with that color. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we do. We draw with the color. We're not noodling in a drawing.
Yeah, yeah.
So all our articulation of so yeah. But I just want to make sure that that's for everybody. That's really clear that there is a slow process in which you're introducing those elements. So when you go to do the color and then you bring the colors together, you're correcting the color, but then you're also powering up effects. So that you're creating contrast, the range of and so that's the projectivity. That's what we call visual order. Really, is literally the part of the image. Maybe it's the light above my head if you guys are looking at this, or maybe it's the shine on your head. I'm being rude now. No, or somebody's teeth, or so.
Yeah.
Anyway, but there's an order of effect, and this is just like in the lightest light and darkest dark. You have to find out what it's going to take to make your chief effect. So you see, you're just setting the table. Dark in the color thing, it was darkest dark and lightest light, the red, yellow, blue, the most chromatic, and there's a range. You know what I mean? So you're organizing the colors so it looks like that color scheme. Without covering your canvas, you can make the whites too big. You won't have too much trouble. Make the darks a little less dangerous. You always have a rag in your hand. I'm just saying these things so they're being heard again. But so it's not the most greatest catastrophe if you put a dark in the wrong place. But you also got to remember when you're laying it in, don't be worrying about the spatial. You got a rag in your hand.
Yeah.
You can really take it right down to the virtual white again. So yeah, but I am saying that we are slowly setting them up. So you set up color, and then you improve the color, and you're starting at the beginning of the spatial. But actually, you're not quite. You're now setting up the visual order, the order of effects. But as soon as you have these effects starting to make sense, of course, now where do they go? Because you can't just have them those things random. So that's when the spatial, somewhere in there, right? And then keep on going like that, and it begins to be a question of backstragglers and just, whatever the part that needs. And again, as I said, the backstragglers always got to be all-encompassing. You take in the whole, and you notice a part just really feels poor. And you go down there and find its name. So is that a color problem? Is it a chroma? If it is it a chroma or value or whatever, a hue problem? Or is it a spatial problem? Is it a size to something problem and all that sort of stuff? So, yeah, no, I won't say more than that.
Yeah,
I may be saying too much, yeah.
Well, it's very helpful. It just, I think there's such a need for security, like in the painting, and I think that's what leads me into drawing too big of a shape or even, because, I really don't have an intention to draw the objects. It's not ever what I really want to do, even to see them.
Yeah, in other words, you're into the impressionist modality. You're very happy to have the color play and the whole general impression in its internal organization.
Yeah, it's so much
doing its dance.
It's so much more fun and interesting, and even seeing in sets and having different concepts. But I have I need this security, something to say like this is here or whatever, so I can gauge a size relationship, right. And then all of a sudden I have too much drawing and now there's a bottle or something like that. And
right.
But is there a...
And by the way, you're saying that and people don't know what you're talking about when you're saying suddenly there's a bottle.
Oh.
You're saying there's a bottle, it becomes an object before its time, when your job was to set up, say this light to that other light to this triad of lights in here as your primary setup.
Right.
Well, your job is to get that triangle in the right place and the right size, and that's it. And not to make the size of those lights to each other. You stay away from that. You just deal with this bit of what we call a point, setting up and getting the angle right to another point, and it is its own object.
Mm-hmm.
It's not three objects. It is a rectangle or a triangle or whatever it is. So I'm just saying that so you guys have heard it in case that's a new idea. But we do try to avoid making it look like an object per se for a while. And you want to get good at that, and you want to get your security in the abstract, so in the rectangle. Are these lights dancing where they ought to be? That's called the spotting, right? Are they dancing where they ought to be dancing? Because that's your composition. Everything from that point forward. By the way, in just the color scheme, it's composition. Just when you're getting the color, you're not just getting the color, you're getting the color scheme. That by definition, that's the word scheme. It says you put all these things together and you've got them looking really good as color. They compose well as color, and now you're just doing, it's still composition as soon as you start going to placement on the page.
Yeah.
But what we talk about, we talk about the arabesque, which is the figure created by those great abstractions. So if it's a big triangle, that's all I mean by it. But you know all that. And what I find is that people can't get joy out of that. There's somehow that is like the enemy or the taskmaster or something like that. But if you have this, if the spotting of your picture is good, what's not to want?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you had this great abstraction in the middle and just well placed in the rectangle, and by the way, the dominant part of a compositions are the strong players, and they are a set. And if you get those good, most of the rest, it's not ever possible to say that they don't count, but they count for far less in the world of equilibrium and distribution than the minors. Unless there's 40 minors and they're way over at the edge doing noisy things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
I'm getting off your point, I think.
No. It's such a thing where, for me, I feel like I really see that joy, see that fun in the color relations and the arabesque, and then I go to execute and I end up somewhere else,
Mean mentally, or you just end up doing something that had nothing to do with what should have been your first mission.
Yeah, well, it seems
you're just trying to get your way across the canvas.
I'm sure part of it is that I'm going too fast.
Okay, good. Right, and haste makes waste, and we all know these things.
I think
the hurrier you go, the behinder you get, is what my mother said.
Yeah. I also think that maybe I don't think through my color, my paint application, or like when I'm putting down the brushstroke and understanding like where I want that brushstroke to begin and end, or how it's gonna. I think I'm too impulsive, or I just kind of put it on and think that it'll just be fine. When
people just put it on, it's usually, the problem isn't that they just put it on. The problem is they didn't go and look and see what piece of crap they put down, and then they go on to something else. That's certainly that's part of the intentionality factor.
That's certainly it. Yeah.
So if you're all concerned about spatial, you can be trying to get this to this to this because that's the spatial thing. But I'm actually trying to get you to address the look of nature at a point and create a triangle in a very conscious way, a very deliberate way.
Yeah.
And so you have this need to do remarkable likeness, meaning to say notable. It's notable. It's noticeable. So when you do the forehead, and I've showed that picture, the laying of the woman's head. When you do that line, when you're sitting up top of the head, you have to do enough so it becomes hair. It doesn't become hair because it looks hairy. It's a dark meets a light and has the right kind of an edge and a little bit of a shape.
Yeah.
And you're not happy until the color relations are right and the location's right and the edge relationships are right.
Yeah.
Did I say edge? Okay. Yeah. So you see what I mean? But you see how much work that was. That's the slow down, and you're still only setting that up to go down to the bottom and set that point up with the same intentionality and direction and focus.
So,
and I don't mean in focus. I mean focus your work on
that
spot.
Yeah. So doing that, it's. Would you say that setting up those relationships, is that something that could span 20 minutes for someone like me, like, or an hour, or?
Yeah. I mean, so for example, if you're not accustomed to doing it, you don't know.
Yeah.
If you just get something plausible up there and you're not even really looking, you're not checking. You want to get a concept of that, like the forehead thing. You want to get a concept of that fixed in your mind, and then you want to articulate it. You want to get the color relation right, the value relation right, the edge relation right, the chroma relation right, and then you're going to work this shape with the edge quality. It's a systematic, patient process. Mm-hmm. Well, once you get that down, that's what you're doing, your arms can fly. There's nothing to tell you how fast or how slow to go. That's in the person's your personal territory. You know, it's your structure of your body or whatever. You know, if someone like Soroya says, if I don't paint fast, I can't paint at all.
Yeah.
Well, and other people will say opposite of that, but there's something about that just being his pace, his pacing. But so the only thing about speed that matters is if you're being effective, speed is nothing. If you're being effective, there's no reason to hang around. Just make that thing work. Make sure you go debrief to make sure it does work. You got a concept. You just go up there and put the time in until you believe you got it, having a good look at it. Then go back and glance at the page and see if it's sort of, you know, as they say, Meldrum says, like, well, is it just going to fuse with the other one if they overlapped each other? And, you know, it's not, sight size is, it's not literally that it's going to do it, but there's an adequacy level that you'll recognize. It's not sight size. It doesn't imply that your colors are going to match or anything like that.
Right.
So, but you'll also know, remember we were talking earlier, I think it was yesterday, about memory. You don't have to go, if you're doing memory drawings, you don't have to go and put tracing paper. You already know. You're an idiot. You already know. You weren't even there. That this is totally stupid and you don't need to know.
Yeah.
You don't have somebody tell you. Well, that's a thing, right? So you look at that forehead and that's not very good. Well, the first times you do it, it might take a very long time. What do you care? Because what's going to happen is if you can just do that well, and knowing and accepting that as a part of this process, bringing the finish to the start. It doesn't mean, by the way, that it's finished. You know, you always are going to paint something 2 and 3 times. I don't care what edge it is. Typically, that's what's going to happen, or what area it is. And so I'm just saying it's pretty routine. There's some times when it doesn't happen, you do it fewer times. But what was I going to say? Did I say enough on that one? Maybe I did.
Yeah. Oh, you were saying you got to put your time in, and yeah.
Yes, the skill. So you don't shorten the skill. You don't shorten the skill for this painting. You're training a dog. You're being good at certain things. So that's my point to you. And the last chapter of my book, if you guys may see it someday, it's called The Finish is in the Start.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we mean by it. It means you articulate a thing to look like itself. Bonnat says make a thing as like as you can the first time.
Yeah.
It's in that class. Except that we're direct painters. We're not making it like as it can as a drawing. We're making it as like as we can as a look of nature mark the first time. Just like we're putting color notes down. We're trying to get them as like as we can the first time. And then we sit on them and play them and tune them to each other until it's majestically like what we love about our color scheme in our painting. And that's that mercy. But if you don't do that, and most people don't, most people do something vaguely adequate, meaning they're really not there. So I like that walkabout. You're sort of not there, but you sort of think maybe you are, or maybe you think you are because you want to be or something. You know, I mean, us as when you're a young person.
You know, well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is I'm kind of noticing a trend in my process or how I move through works from start to finish, where I'm kind of making a mess. Well, I don't want to say making a mess, but I'm not very, I don't feel like the authority of the painting. The painting's kind of pushing me around. I'm not pushing the painting around. Things are kind of getting out of control or whatever.
Good thing to notice.
And then,
by the way, he's being a model of what I try to get students to do, and that is self-awareness. Just keep an eye on yourself.
Yeah.
It really pays off to find out what crazy man. That's what I was telling you guys, that when I was standing there as a student, and Paxton said, "Look 4 times for every time you make a mark," or whatever he said, 3 times. I forget, did he say 4?
I think 4. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I remember having a charcoal in my hand, and I started looking at it. I was sort of looking 4 times, but I was just going bang, 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 you know. No. And I ran up there. I knew I had nothing in my brain. I just knew it. So I walked back, and I did it again. And I did it, and I walked forward again with nothing in my brain. And finally, I went back, and I put my charcoal down. I said I was going to wait until I had something in my brain, until I had actually seen something. You know what I mean? And that's all that 4 times looking is. Make sure you're seeing something, and then walk up there and do it. Anyway, this is part goes to the territory. Goes to that territory, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, it's almost embarrassing to say, but
all of this is kind of funny, embarrassing. It's good. It's good embarrassing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going for something amazing, you're not there. You don't start there.
Yeah.
You start with, what a mess I've made.
I know.
I mean, I was laughing at some of the paintings I probably should have burned them once, but for some reason, they keep turning up. Our students like stuff where I was asking these really bizarre questions. Other people around me were doing worse, believe me, but
Yeah.
at least you too. But anyway, yeah.
Well, the thing I was
Yeah.
going to say is that I get to a point where then I have drawing going on,
Yeah.
and I almost am
And what do you mean by drawing going on?
like, well, I have the wrong kind of drawing going on, like shapes.
You start
You
painting
know,
objects.
I start painting objects and things, and then I use that to back into the visual order, and to try to put
Yeah,
things in visual order.
there actually is a model that looks like that, and it's decried by, I want to say Hale, but one of those Velasquez. I mean, maybe it was Stevenson in the Velasquez book, where they talk about the rub-in approach, and that's just a mess. In a half hour, you put stupid down.
Yeah,
So if you cover the
yeah,
canvas in a half hour, I used to tell students to try to do it, and I'd laugh and say, "Don't really," but that's all you get. And then all you're doing after that is you're puddling through masses of mud, and you
yeah,
can't articulate clean, intentional stuff. There is a little bit in Schmidt's book where he talks about that the way he describes it is exactly the same experience as mine. He would find himself with a whole mess and wonder how he got there.
Hmm.
That's so. What are you gonna do about it, right? I mean, that begins to be the question that leads to this intentionality from the first stroke, making as like as you can the first time. He didn't take quite the same approach I did. He would work a thing up like an object in an area. I don't do that. I'm more concerned about the grand scheme.
Right.
And I would say that he's, in a lot of his work, he's more of what I'd call an illustrator. So that really is more subject oriented. I'm not going to say any more than that, but there's a slight difference in that I care about the abstract permanently, not just longer, but permanently.
Right, right.
Which I
Yeah.
mean to say is that whole idea of the triangles and irregular, and the dance of the colors to each other and the music they're making, not realism. But yeah, but that is a big deal. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean,
we all go through that. Yeah,
yeah, I don't favor it. It doesn't work out well. So I'm trying to keep that fresh in my mind to kind of break that. I don't want to create a habit of doing that, every time and whatnot. But
So would you say that you're working too fast when that happens, or are you just not there? Just to clear, is there clarity in your mind about which one it is, or is it just sort of a pile of both where you just start throwing things?
I'm probably I'm probably making it sound worse than it is. I think
Based on what I've seen, I think you're just making it sound worse than it is by a little bit.
I think it's probably sometimes I feel like I'm inhibited by how slow I'm going, and then I'm like, but maybe you're not going slow enough,
Well, the hallmark of great masters is patience.
Yeah, yeah,
Start slow so you can finish fast, quoting Yang. And of course, then the Leonardo one is, it's not, speed will come, is essentially what he says. Speed will come. Just it's better to bear down and do well and let the speed worry about itself. So, but I do sometimes put things out there. Like my intention is to cover my canvas in the first day. If I don't do it in the first day, I certainly won't do it in 2 days. I'm talking about, say, if it's a big painting and there's some, but I try to do it in a matter of hours, and I try to have it dry before I touch it again. So
is it?
But that sets you up in a sense for failure. The first time I did a start was to figure out what a start looks like, and it took me 6 days. You know what I mean? And then I said, "There, now can I do that?" And and I knew, by the way, already I didn't have to ask it, but I could see that I didn't go to sub levels of data. I just did really good with the first level, and it took me 6 days to be able to look at the painting and say, "This is going to be dang good." But it wasn't finished dang good. It was good in the sense that the setup was all talking. The color scheme was there. The visual order stuff was powering. The distribution on the page, size relationships of anything that showed, it was all there and happening. So I could easily see that it was going to be a good picture. So I could see the composition. But it did take me six. I remember the word six, the number 6. But I was sorting the idea of figuring out what a start is. Now, if you don't, and people don't always, if you don't buy into what we did with Gamma, we did outline drawings. If we did drawings, we traced them on the canvas, and we filled in big masses between the lines, up to the lines, And it's a different model. So admittedly, but I remember getting to the point with Gamma that I would be in a painting for a month and not know if I even believed it could be successful.
Yeah.
And I determined that that wasn't a useful world to be in. I wanted to know as early as possible, so I wasn't wasting time. Well, all that really means is you have to be able to see the beauty of what you're going after on the canvas in front of you early. And so if you buy that, all I was saying about that is that's my modus operandi. And if you buy that one, you're under some pressure. Admittedly, you're under some pressure. So, but that you can't speed up. Make it a 6-day start if you have to. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because a bunch of it is going to be you learning how to make marks better. Some of it's going to be you learning how to to go right back and do it until you get it,
Yeah.
and not just running off to the next item with this worry about. By the way, working in a studio with a lot of other people is always one of those things that makes you draw too early. It's all about you don't want to look bad, stuff like that. And I don't mean we think that much consciously, and you think you can think past it because you're a big boy now. But for some reason, I have always found that even when I was trying to work in the studio with students in the next studio over, I would start painting wrong. Because of that sensation of what people might think and stuff like that. So things like that might be a concern to you. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to change the subject here, but
Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about is that I'm looking at the subject, the arrangement, whatever I have, and that's my model. But my start is not going to look. It's not the finish. The finish is in the start, but it's not the finish. It's not that look. So there's this other appearance that the start has.
Right.
And I think I judge my start on the wrong model, on the model of the nature.
Considerable.
And so it causes me to not see the potential or what's working because it's not.
So that's the thing with it. See, since you're addressing that, it means you already grasped that you're not trying to make it literally like that, but you're making it effectually like that or essentially like that. So that's where you have Gamel saying that, don't you see what Sargent does is a series of sketches. So what is a sketch but a summary? It's a grand summary.
Yeah.
But if to be useful, it has to be good in its grand gesture and its color scheme and its visual order, its size relationships and blobs. It has to be dang good in lots of ways.
Yeah.
But think of it for a second. I'm suggesting that without thinking sketch meaning,
Sure.
and just that. I don't know what sketching is, by the way. I do know what sketching is in the sense though that you get a concept in your mind and you quickly address it, and with the intention of getting as much data out there so you can see the thing as a whole as early as possible. But it's all true data.
Yeah.
But there is an element of what you might call the sketch summary in the start, and that's a big deal to try to figure out exactly what. And that's why I try to get people to blur their eyes, because first of all, in a sketch, all you need is the power players. So that gives you the blur your eyes, and you know what not to draw.
Yeah.
That's why I say that. What not to draw? That means we're in the start. What not to draw? Well, later we'll draw it, but in the start, what not to draw? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
But if you don't blur your eyes, you don't get that. You don't know what not to draw because you have no sense of what's important. But the fact is, as I said before, your design is entirely based on, I say virtually entirely, the equilibrium, the distribution, all that sort of stuff is based on the strong players and their conversation.
Yeah.
And then, you can keep pushing it further, bringing more in because you wonder whether this is going to affect the balance or something like that. So you can do it a little more if you have time at the end of a start. But you'll see plenty of Sargent starts or the Benson ones I show, and I'm not showing them here today, but where you can see that there are a couple places where it went a little further. And, if you put everything down flat, then you won't even be able to tell you if you have a center of interest sometimes, because part of making a center of interest isn't just that it's brighter than somewhere else, but it also is busier. So some of that, in the sketch model. Another thing you have to learn to accept, though, is that in the sketch model, there are things like we were talking about in the one you're working on it. You address busy areas by just loose brushwork, loose value work. so that you're not losing time, but you still want it to look busy-ish. My shirt would be maybe in that class of things that would look busy-ish. You know, if you're first laying it in, you don't lay it in yellow and then put some black stripes. You know? All right. So, and again, you guys pay attention to Meldrum if you don't know what that means, but you know what the general tonality is what you're after, and the general color and all those sorts of things. But that sense of the busy is a thing I find is really useful at the beginning. But it's hard for people to do that because they're looking right at it to see which things are doing the busiest, and they're not. And there's this need to be aware in this broader way, in this grand way. Because remember, I was saying to you guys that when you're chasing down, when Monet is chasing down the sky, he's using a little brush. He's getting this note with a lot of marks, but he's got his awareness on the unity of that note. You see that his priority, and then there's a once that's established well, there's all sorts of variations within that can happen, but then you'll know what you're trying to maintain. So you get pink clouds or whatever, but you already got the general tonality.
Yeah.
But it's in that class though, where you see what I'm saying? Yeah. So things you do have to learn, if you want to put it that way, about what you can say, what you can't say, but you want to get to that thing where you say, this is going to be fun. I'm going to sell this one. I can tell you. In fact, I'll show it to somebody tomorrow because
that sounds
because this is what they've been looking for. It's magic already. And that's of course the argument I make that a number of Boston School painters, if their model was Paxton, if Benson's model was Paxton's, one of his most beautiful pictures would have just been a hunk of realism today. If his approach was now we have to noodle up this and noodle up that, noodle up this, and little fingers, and he would have lost. I mean, the music was there way before that, and so that's one of those things to get away from that model. However, you have to get away from it.
Yeah.
Because if your picture isn't beautiful before you get there from across the room, noodling ain't going to help. And I don't mean to say that there's not some consequential stuff that happens in certain kinds of paintings in particular. Like if you're like Ang, it's the great forms and then the modulations in the smaller forms. You can't see that stuff till you get close, admittedly, right?
Yeah.
But you also can't see minor value movements and interplay happening through a passage until you're close to. What you can see is the great game from across the room. And it's either good or not good. It was one of the disappointing things about Andrew Wyeth's work to me was when I saw it in the museum, and you couldn't even, it had no color. It was like an ink drawing or something. You had to walk up real close just to see what the heck it was doing. Wow. There's a big one in the museum, and it was very disappointing. There was no projection, no color quality. And I mean, for what it is, I've never disliked Andrew Wyeth. Mm-hmm. But that thing is like, well, if you're an impressionist, part of what you're in it for is color, not just some generalized neutral where you can't go wrong, but the life in the color, bringing some vitality and stuff. If you're like me, you can be whoever you are. You set up your subjects in a very modest. But I'm just saying that is one of those things where I'm saying if I try to get students to stand in the middle of the museum room and then look around and see which painting they're going to look at, which one draws them. Yeah. Because it's a thing to know. And this is all actually strictly out of the Gamble Boston School background, that conversation is.
So when it comes to flatness it's starting to become more from your last video and recently it's starting to seem like flatness is a huge asset to the start, to seeing or kind of developing in a concept of what that start would be. Yeah.
You take it. Is your meaning? Did you take it from that video? So what I mean is the unity more than more than the top of the table, flatness.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty much
larger units hanging together. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and trying to understand that I'm not, by seeing it that way, I'm not generalizing, right? But I'm actually, I don't know, for lack of a better word, consolidating or unifying. Yeah.
No, well, that's what the thing is about it. You're looking for the great notes that are talking to each other. You don't have time for the rest, and you don't want time for the rest. You're trying to set the table for any level of more articulation, more data.
John and I were discussing his cast today, right. And we were talking about the main arabesque. What is the main arabesque? And instead of, what were we saying? It was this idea, like, I think it's essentially about like having a concept, but instead of floating points and then relate them, like have that relation in the mind first,
Very good.
and then float the points so that you can see
Yes.
what you're.
That's why I say that the whole point of this is immediately unifying. One point doesn't get it. It's got to be 2 or 3 points. Obviously, unity doesn't mean anything unless you have more. It's a singular is already unified. But yeah, so that's really a big deal. Yeah, to say it that way. Yeah, it's true that most people are putting it down and just looking over there to see what it is, but they don't have an idea of how it hangs together initially. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. So
But they see how focused then your attention becomes.
yeah, that's it really changes.
Yeah.
It changes it, because I think maybe that's a huge part for me too, is that I'm typically have been working the other way, where I put something down, then I put something else. I put something down.
And the 21 points later,
Yeah.
you still don't know what you got.
Yeah. And I'm not really putting them down relationally. I'm just judging them individually and then seeing if they're in the right location, or, so that's another way to get out of the spatial thing. But,
Yeah.
like, I forgive myself, but it's good to be aware of these things, as.
Well, you don't get as juicy rewards if you don't have bigger ideas. You know what I mean? You have to see what things are up to together. And by the way, it applies to just value to value. Or if you're doing just the line portion on a white paper because you don't want to actually, and draw it lightly, you don't want to go to black mass and then have it destroy because you're going to have to need the white to make your blast of light on a white and charcoal drawing. So, but when you set up, I've always observed that when you set up the top of the head and the bottom of the foot, a standing figure, and you just find that one point of the hip, and all of a sudden you can see the entire proportion. I mean, it's astonishing what you can see. And you can even see if it's in the right place. But again, the top of the head and the foot, you already have the potential. And that's what I've talked about in other videos where I show that cast. You have the potential of already being wrong. And so what this is to that is already a unity. It's a grand concept that includes the grand angle between the two, the placement on the page of the two, and even the value relations and whatever size sort of is suggested. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Sharpness of edge. All these things are already there and need to be addressed just in a bang way. And if you want you to learn that these are the players, you won't reject them. Once you know that that's what you're doing, you need to look at nature and the unity.
Wow.
And then you just go on and on. But it's a silly thing because it sounds like this. And by the way, this is the start slow thing. It sounds like you're being tedious and small in a little world. But actually, you're being big as you could possibly be.
Yeah.
And yet you have to do it with the ant-sized mark, the articulation that's got to be precise.
Yeah.
For you to say this big thing about it, because it's going to otherwise say a false thing in all these different ways. So it's creating it's creating chaos, or it's hanging together.
Yeah.
And once you understand the first 2 points, the third one is just. So what it is then there's this whole thing that people don't get used to, and that is you do that with intention, and then you do the review. You add a new point, and you watch into the unity again. How does it all hang together? So much better if you have a concept. And every 2 points even has a gestural quality, and every 3 points has its own gesture and a width to length, triangle or something.
Yeah.
So there's no end to the quick assessment. A lot of people think it's going to be a long, tedious assessment, but it's a quick assessment. It's either right or on. It's either on or off, and you deal with it. You don't just walk around with something wrong. But you don't have to go in there and analyze it with a computer or a stylus or something.
Right.
You just look at it. But if you don't have a concept, you won't know if you're wrong. If you do have a concept, you'll know that you didn't get it yet. Without even looking, you'll know. This is why I try to get people to go up there and stay on the paper until they believe they've got what they think they saw.
Yeah. Wow, it's really making me think about patience again, which you mentioned already. But it's like, because there's this thing where I put something down and then I'm like, oh, I need more. Right. I need more to know or to figure it out. But it's like, if I'm just patient and I really expand what I'm working with, then there's something that can happen there. That's
the scriptures talk about faithful in little things, and then you'll be given bigger things.
I like that. Yeah.
It fits us pretty good.
Yeah.
Are you faithful in little things? Now, are you picking top and bottom 2 little flags? But the faithfulness in little things is, did you rightly relate them in every way? This long angle to each other. And by the way, even did you put them on the page where you chose to put them? But faithful, So so look at them and see that they are in sync.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you're going to be looking at very complex abstractions, and not be frightened, because you've done all your work every time through. It's like it is true. It's like built into a system. I was at a restaurant the other day, and I was just thinking, these guys, these waitresses there's something systematic about what they're doing. They must know to do this, 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 and this, and they go back and do this routine again. And how are we any different from that? You know what I mean?
Oh, that's interesting.
There's a series of things we do, and we repeat them. It really is true. And to me, it's no more complicated than moving a chess piece once. What is that? There's a way bigger game happening, and you better be aware of the rest of the game when you move that piece. But
Yeah.
in other words, the unity of the game, I don't think it's any different. I heard you're good at that, by the way. You're not bad, huh? You put a lot of misspent youth hours into that?
No, actually, but I'm probably a lot better at painting, and that doesn't say much. But yeah, I like to play, but yeah.
I started to play at one point, and I realized it was either going to be painting or chess. It was way too interesting, and I just couldn't see playing badly, and I wasn't going to be able to put the time in.
Yeah, it got to a point where I had this fantasy that I could be a great chess player at any point or whatever, and I got to a point where I'm like, you really do have to pick one thing.
It is the rest of your life.
Yeah.
These Bobby Fishers don't happen on the fly.
Yeah.
Are we getting to your issue in some useful way? I mean, that thing I wouldn't mind addressing more is that idea of being there, being aware of what you're seeing, and some of that, it just takes time drawing slavishly in front of you, and you do it badly, and one day you just start trying to figure out what am I seeing here? Why doesn't this look like it? So some of it is that, but is there more that could be said about that? I'm talking about it as I'm using the word awareness in the same sense as a Zen person would do it. You sit there and just become aware. You're just aware of your space and the world you're in and stuff like that. But in the course of painting, you have to know where you are, what you're doing at every minute. But you also have to know how to do it. And that's, as a student, you're trying to figure out how to do it, and then you don't even know what the heck the it is. Half the time, you know what I mean? So I am trying to address that, trying to give you my version of it. And by the way, the best thing I can do really is just tell you what's worked for me, and or show you with the brush or whatever, and make suggestions. But you have to, you'll have to see needs and address stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing about staying on my feet, staying centered.
Yeah.
And I think, probably a lot of it is just getting knocked off my feet by, the wanting to, the urgency to want to know this or to own it or something. And then there's, it gets to a point where maybe, frustration can come from that, from another start that's just not going how I thought it might go or something. But it's me just pitying myself or something to some degree, Well,
the emotional, psychological baggage is always there. And there's two things that I find have always caused or been created or caused it, whatever. But one is weariness, just flat tiredness.
Yeah, that's a real thing for me.
Yeah, and one of those things, I was learning to meditate, and the person who was showing me how to do it, he said, if you start falling asleep meditating, go take a nap and try it again.
Yeah.
Well, how could that be any more apropos? I mean, I would just find myself, and I know it was exhaustion, but at the end of 2.5 hours, I'd wrecked all the good work I'd done. For the next 20 minutes, it was just gone, and I wonder what happened. I got sick of it after a while. It's one of the nice things about practice. There are things you have to get sick of to stop doing.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's about just tiredness, and youth doesn't get that. Youth just you never address that. It's like cats running around.
Yeah.
One day they just fall down, whatever. But it's just, that's what it is. But that weariness thing is one.
Yeah.
But the other one is other things, like fear of failure and stuff like that, and it just creates anxiety and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's still the same camp. I just have found that if you see those things, if you can look at them and see what you're doing, you might even start laughing. But you'll see that they're going to afflict you. And something I was doing today, I was painting on this little teeny picture for a gift for somebody, and I found myself getting some kind of tense, and I didn't know what the heck it was, but I knew to get out of the room. But that's experience. You
Yeah.
need to just get out of the room. I don't know what is this I'm addressing, and then your brain goes back and says, "Are you tired?" Or you have this list, but that list is very much like the. So don't ever underestimate the importance of your mental, your physical body.
Yeah.
And how it affects the mental stuff.
So that's the thing where if I'm feeling a certain way that's not how I want to feel when I'm painting, or I should say that it's distracting me in some way, I just got to stop.
Yeah, just stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least look at it, and there's a chance if you just look at it, if you become aware of it, that you can go back to work, and you'll always be aware of it, but it's over there now. It's a thing, it's a real significant thing. But yeah, I've had students come in exhausted, and they go into a thing where they just do this old adding more stuff, like adding more details to whatever they're working on. It's never this comprehensive visual impression, relational play that really requires you to be attentive every minute. That's one of the things about painting, though. It's like Gamble said once about painting, and I think I've said it to you guys out there. He said, You're not a painter to have fun as a painter. You're a painter to make other people have fun looking at your paintings.
Yeah.
And so something with this idea of painting is fun. Right. Now you know that I get the biggest kick out of painting. I mean, there's no way in the world, in a sense, it's not fun. But if you just go into this place where you're just having a nice day, you're not going to produce great paintings.
Yeah.
That's work, man. It's work.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work is the stuff that goes into just looking at things and wondering what the guy meant when he said edge, or when you're looking at it and why this thing projects off the canvas and yours doesn't, What is that thing? Because it's just visual stuff. And you get to know names, you get to know words like values, and, before you know it, you have some, you named enough of the pigs, you have some idea what it is you have to be good at, and then you train the dog a little bit. But in the long run, your dog has to be trained to be there for you for anything. You know how that Paxson thing, if you hang a sign that says painter, it means you can do anything required.
Yeah.
Well, your dog has to be that. You got a problem, you got to know how to fix it. That's mastery.
Yeah.
You got to know what it is, you got to be able to name it, and then you got to know how to play the game and make it work, So that's not child's play. And no, it just isn't. It's just, it is true what DeGaulle said. It's so easy when you know nothing about it. Painting is.
Right. Well, I feel pretty enthusiastic and motivated to get back in there.
Well, you're saying that at just the right time. We got to get out of here. Oh, we've almost done an hour. Shawn, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
I don't think we should do any ending or anything. But I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
And,
it's really
yeah.
Very helpful.
It's fun having you around. It's nice to have people who don't mind articulating. And I'm finding that all of my guys are gradually, as I get to know them, everybody can speak.
Yeah.
And it matters that so much of our thought about painting is because what do they say? Because words, we use words to figure things out, to solve problems, but naming the pigs, if you don't know the difference between values and chromas, there's no future for you in this field.
Yeah.
So words, and then how you use them and all that sort of stuff, and why we want to why do we want to lay a painting in the first day? There's a lot to think through, and all of it requires words. But you guys, the guys I'm getting now, are right at that phase when you've spent at least a few years now thinking.
Yeah.
Whereas before it might have been more tough to work with you.
Well, it's really fun to see everybody's work, and everybody has their own thing.
It's amazing. Isn't it?
It's so interesting. Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. When you're young, you just are jealous of everybody. At least I was a bad boy that way. I thought it was the other person that was causing the tension in the room, but I learned later it was always me. It's just me. Jealous may not be the right word. Competitive. Some people call it competitive. Maybe that's what it was. But I remember that. Yeah. But the fact is, the longer you live, the more you realize that nobody's got your fingerprints, and nobody's got your responsibilities because of your because of who you are and what's been given to you.
Yeah.
So, man, you got to live up to that, whatever in the world that is.
Yeah, I always like the idea of like I want everybody because there's that saying of you're the 5 people you surround yourself with or whatever
Yeah.
so I want everybody around me to be way better than me, so that means I'll be getting better.
Yeah. And other painters have said the same stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Well,
thank you, Shawn. Thank you again to Serge. I think it's Sergio E. and David D. You guys know who you are, and you know you're appreciated. I don't know how when these came in. I think these are more recent, and I know that we've gotten behind. I think there's probably 3 more donations that I'm trying to list, but I'm thinking that Mr. Producer can manage with with me framing it that way without putting pictures up. All right, great. So you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next time.